So I think we have an advantage in the market specifically because of that, because we came from B2C and we already had these kind of tricks of the trade. Now going into a B2B2C market where the vast majority of our competitors started in B2B2C. So they're not focused on engagement in the way, and they don't know how to market or create these kind of engagement tools in the same way that people coming from B2C. Like your bread and butter in B2C is making sure people are engaged. And sometimes it's, we can have a whole philosophical debate about what that's done to society, but people are really good at it. And they have a lot of really good, features and lessons to learn that can be translated into a B2C market.
Welcome to the Product Tea with Leah. I am your host, Leah Tarin, and we are about to spill the tea with the best from tech about product growth and senior leadership topics. Good morning to the Fintech whiz and CEO of Navit, the app that's making saving as addictive as scrolling through Instagram. After earning her stripes with a master's in public health, she spent 12 globe-trotting years uncovering the financial secrets of communities worldwide. But when she's not busy reshaping financial destinies, she's likely lighting up stages from Morgan Stanley to podcasts like this one, spreading the good word about financial literacy with a side of sass. Because who says money talks have to be boring? Welcome to the Product Tea, Erin Papworth. How are you doing this morning?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to add sass to your sass.
I'm really looking forward to that. But before we look forward to that, can you introduce yourself to the people that might not know you?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm Erin Papworth. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Navit. Navit, as you said, is a financial health tool that's looking to make finances accessible and fun. And really specifically the cash flow management of building habits around it in a fun way. Yeah, I spent a long time doing behavioral health overseas from the United States, mainly in Africa. And I came back and started Navit because I used technology in Africa to really help change people's lives and financial technology specifically, and came back and was like, look, the same financial stress that exists over there exists here. It's just in a different kind of context. So here I am.
That's really cool. I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you about all of it. But before we do that, what do people get wrong about you once they get to know you?
Yes, that's such a good question. I think that people in close proximity think I have it all together. Like I manage a lot of things like a business and kid and household and personal lives. And they don't see how it's a lot of internal work. There's a lot going on in the background and it's not always pretty.
I think I can relate to this. Like I sometimes get tagged in LinkedIn posts where people just say like, oh, Leah has everything here together. And I'm like, I'm sitting here like having a mental breakdown.
Yeah. You are not in my head when all the internal workings. It's a lot of internal work to stay calm in all these situations.
It took me a lot of emotional processing to not emotionally process it to this point,
Totally. Meditations.
Yeah, no, that does not work anymore. Don't have time for that. But yeah.
I found recently, I was like, meditation can be whatever you want. I find it an exercise. Like I started doing a boxing class and you said I can swear. So beating the shit out of a boxing bag is like a form of meditation for me. And it's amazing.
That's fantastic. Yeah, you can put the face of difficult clients on the boxing bag and then you
have no idea how many people have been on that bag.
Okay, we're not talking about this bag right now. This could be detrimental to your career right now. I did start, so it's funny because I started about 5 months ago with weightlifting, and we've talked about this really briefly about manicure and stuff before, but like my hands are starting to get a lot of...
The calluses. You gotta get the gloves.
Yeah, now when I slap people, it hurts more. Okay, we have to leave this topic before it gets any worse. So can you really briefly explain maybe what Navit is, other than just a domain in an Italian country where you're probably not selling to? And then we go a little bit more.
Yes, that was the whole thing. So specifically, in America, and this is, I know we have an international context, but in America, about 80% of people don't have more than $500 for an emergency. So, and a lot of that in our context, and I also in Europe, we do a lot, I have a lot of work and footprint mainly in England, but somewhat in Europe. The way you build wealth, if you don't come from wealth, it's either entrepreneurship, which is a very small, or like you get early stage startup, right? Which is a very small population, or you inherit it, which is also a small population. Or the third one is over time, you spend less than you earn. You earn it and you save it. And then from there, you can, invest it and grow your wealth. So that is really like, to be able to do that, spending less than you earn is really hard, especially in an economy like this and with inflation and all the things that are happening in our world. So really what our focus is how do we help people build the best behavioral habits around optimizing their paycheck, understanding how to spend less than they earn, then from there, how to save it. And how can we use AI? The biggest thing for me is, all this financial literacy world has been very generalized. You can read something about compound interest, but how does that relate to you? How do we use technology and AI to really focus all of the information and the action we give people to their personal situation? Everyone's different. Finances are a crazy industry, and but it all works the same. Like interest is interest, APR is APR. But every individual has a very specific experience, both from their childhood, like traumas and their beliefs around money, but to their financial situation, how much they earn, if they have kids, where they're living, et cetera. So how do we use technology to really tailor the daily action and help people build habits to grow their wealth and to be financially stable on a daily basis?
So this is interesting on 15 different levels. So let's talk about 3 of them. So the first one is, I think when it comes to financial health, so just in general, this is, to me, in my head, this is a topic that not particularly sexy in the sense of I'm getting up in the morning, I want to do something with financial health and so forth. It's usually something that grows out of a necessity of either someone in your proximity or because something bad happened to yourself and so forth, just like nutrition, right? When do you start to look at nutrition? When you have a health scare, or you're not looking in the way that you should, or the nice media is telling you that you're fat and so forth, and you're not, you know how it is, right? We're just constantly getting hammered with some expectations from others and so forth. So you have this mission in your head. You think it's a good mission to do, and you also have some conviction behind this and so forth. But at the same time, I think you raised money as well, right? You have someone behind you. So what I'm trying to get together now is that, okay, you have a really cool mission. I think it's easy to kind of make sense of it in the sense, this is a necessary, you need to convince people that they need to eat their athletic greens, which are a sham, by the way. But so you have this now, and you also had to create a pitch deck on how to make money off of it, of course, because VCs and anyone that wants money from it, unless they are giving you the money for just really beneficial bits. So how did that particular story go at the very beginning when you started to found your business 5 years ago?
Yes, that's a great question. And you do have to make money in this world. We're not a nonprofit, and I don't want to be a nonprofit. I want to make money. So initially, I was lucky enough that my co-founder and I were able to self-fund the beta version of our product. So we were able to kind of test and get a product out there and be like, okay, what do people need? And I think we briefly talked about this at the beginning, but we started as a B2C company that's now, emerged to be, we sell into employers now as a B2B2C. But by being B2C at the beginning and being able to just put a product out there in the market, we were able to really test. Okay, the core concept was, how can we get people to do something for less than 3 minutes a day around their finances that accumulates over time to help them grow their wealth? And the core thing that we found was, it's all about expense tracking. And it's the most boring, most horrific thing. I hate doing it. I am not a nickel and diming type budgeting person. Mm-hmm. It's really boring. So how do we make it sassy and fun, right? And that became, basically, we created this, and that's a lot of iteration of things, but we created this amazing, I'm sure you have dating apps over in Switzerland. We have an app called Bumble, but they all have the same concept of swiping.
We have Bumble too. It's the same way, not fun as it is in the US, but please continue.
Right. Well, it's a lot more fun when you do it with your finances, I'm telling you, because you feel like you're in control. And what we did was, people looking at their finances, when you have a retrospective, I can't remember what I did 3 days ago or what I spent money on 3 days ago, let alone, 30 days, looking back 30 days over the month. So what we did was we broke it down. We did these Bumble swipes for the last 24 to 48 hours of your transactions. And we reward you. And it's all these, you were talking about nutrition. The health industry has figured out how to reward people to change their behavior. So I have this, my fancy little Apple Watch with my circles that I care very much about filling every day. It's a reward and a dopamine hit, right? Where you're getting people to do an action and giving them some sort of reward. So we started creating those kind of things like the swipes. Now you get a reward, you get to organize, and you start to do some mental accounting about what you've spent. It ties into, okay, now we're going to have you save money, but we're not going to have you save $100 at the end of the month. I'm going to have you save $20 by Friday. And how do we, incrementally create these tiny daily habits that then get you to a goal? You went in my business model. So when we tested that and we started to figure out, okay, how do we actually get engagement? How do we get people in? How do we start getting outcomes? At the end of the day, financial technology to date has not really been able to do that and change behavior and get engagement. So if you can get that, that's kind of the holy grail, because then you can start serving them with other products. So for example, I started getting people to save money. Then I started offering a savings account where they could put that money, and I started generating deposit revenue, right? Or it's such high engagement, I can now go sell to employers and say, look at this ROI that I get you. I can measure that your employees are on average about 13% less financially stressed. They're saving on average $250. I have these outcomes that now you can pay me for, basically, right? The product itself, like the core approach that we took, and a lot of people take, this is a novel approach in fintech. Most people in fintech start with a product. They say, okay, I'm going to give you a lower APR savings, you're like a higher APR savings account, and I'm going to give it to you, and here's my product. And product. They start with like the core banking product. And we really believe that if we can get people engaged and get people excited about this product, then we can insert different products under it and still serve their outcomes and serve our business revenue. That's what we've been able to do.
So that's a very interesting one. Basically, what you're doing is you're trying to, you're kind of like a B2C, 2B company.
Yeah, it's so ridiculous.
No, I really like this. This is quite interesting. Let me ask you a couple of questions on what you just said. So you mentioned at the beginning, did you develop this hypothesis of like, how can we get someone to do something for like maximum 3 minutes a day to get some value out? So like, how did you arrive at the 3 minutes? Why is it not 5 minutes? Why is it not 1 minute? Is there some deeper thinking behind this? How did you end up with that?
Behavioral science knows that it's really hard, especially in today's day and age, but with something that's hard, like eating healthy or financial, unless you're excited. There's a very sweet subset of the population, about 5% of people that really love finances and they get excited about doing it. So let them do it 5, 10, 15 minutes a day. But the vast majority of us don't. And so 3 minutes is really the kind of maximum attention that people want to give you. It's even less on, on other kind of social media products and stuff. But it was kind of the maximum amount that we believed we could engage people's attention and still get an outcome that we wanted. Like they really are moving the needle on their financial health by coming in those 3 minutes. And the action needed to be, because it's only 3 minutes, it has to be very high impact for low lift, right? Like it has to be very tailored, it has to be quick. Things like we added a credit builder. So in America, credit is astronomically affects people's financial lives if they don't have a good credit score. We added something that they can check it every day, or they can kind of do some sort of educational piece on it. It's a very quick quiz, and they're paying a monthly stipend to this credit line, and it's done. Right now, they see their points go up every month, and they get this reward back very quickly. Right, so it has to be high impact and low lift for those 3 minutes.
If I'm thinking about this Bumble analogy that you also mentioned, which is also going into this, like you also, because if you only have 3 minutes to spend, you also need to be able to interact fast with it, right? And in the B2B context, or in a workers context, I'm going to make a circle back to this in a second, but I feel like when I think about how I use Slack, I'm not sure whether you've used the swiping feature that they also started to introduce, which is a very interesting one to me now, because it clearly originated from dating apps, in that you have your notifications. And this is also a problem for me right now when I was in a company with 180 people, where about 80 or 90 of those have some kind of direction to me. So I get a lot of messages every day. You're not going anymore from like, oh, I'm just going to go from top to bottom at the end. You're just not doing this anymore. You actually need to decide which messages are worth just keeping on read and which ones are not. And the system is not built for that. But with that actually on top, it works quite well. And I actually have to say that it's funny how much these B2C mechanisms have started to also inform B2B products. Yeah, I find it actually a really cool idea. I probably, if you would have sold this to me like 3 years ago, I would have said like, it's a silly idea. But now I actually see a merit in it, because it really is. Almost everybody seems to know what it means to swipe right.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, thank you, Tinder and Bumble and all of them. But yes. And what I think is interesting, so I think we have an advantage in the market specifically because of that, because we came from B2C and we already had these kind of tricks of the trade. Now going into a B2B2C market where the vast majority of our competitors started in B2B2C. So they're not focused on engagement in the way, and they don't know how to market or create these kind of engagement tools in the same way that people coming from B2C, like your bread and butter in B2C is making sure people are engaged. And sometimes it's, we can have a whole philosophical debate about what that's done to society. But people are really good at it, and they have a lot of really good, features and lessons to learn that can be translated into a B2C market.
I think there's going to be a big reckoning. I don't know how to say it the other way, but I honestly think so. I think this is one of the biggest problems that we have, because I think if I compare also like the usage of my phone, and I've done a lot of stuff to kind of reduce like the attention that it gets from me, it is absolutely horrible how much this is perfected. And I feel like I said this a lot of times also on this podcast. I think modern devices and these systems are so overly optimized just for grabbing attention and not necessarily to deliver you actual value. It's just like really to grab your attention, that it keeps you awake when you should sleep, and it wakes you up also when you sleep, right? Like you wake up in the morning so half of like, oh, phone, right? And it's horrible. As a 43-year-old woman that has known a period in my life where this technology did not exist, I do not know what it will do to the kids. And I don't even have kids, right? So like I'm worried about kids. Imagine that, right?
You should be. It's so funny. So do you know who Estelle Perel is? She's a Belgian psychotherapist. She's big in the States. She has a podcast it's mainly about relationships, but I just saw her last night in Seattle. And she spent probably 30 minutes of her 2-hour thing talking about the lack of intimacy that phones have created. Like you're on the screen all day, fine. Then you go home and you have this partner, you have your kid, I have a kid, and who is fully immersed in phone age, 13-year-old, boy social. And you have this like humans need connection, but now it's so much like you have this like thousands of friends online, but there's no intimate connection. So now there's loneliness, right? And it's a really interesting thing to have to, and we all are trying to very consciously, I think, especially the people that grew up without them, you have to consciously put it away and find time to get that intimacy or any sort of, human connection. Otherwise, I am also worried about this, about society.
No, for sure. I mean, I think it's especially ravaging around people who have ADHD or like executive dysfunction or anything in this regard, which is just quite a problem. And I think on the face of it, you might think that this is actually not a B2B problem, but in B2B context, it's exactly the kind of same, right? So like you said that B2C is focusing on like grabbing attention, but in B2B, we also want to kind of grab the attention of workers. So we have now this thing with we're working from home and so forth, right? Like we should also not constantly control people and so forth. And if you're in a context like this, yeah, you're battling against whatever is happening otherwise, right? And I'm a big proponent of building companies in a way that are intrinsically motivating people, right? Like being a facilitator rather than being a control freak and so forth. Other people are calling it founder mode instead of like dictator mode or whatever. Like, I don't want to get into it. Maybe I want to get into it. I did not really shit on this concept too much on my podcast. I've tried to avoid it. But anyways, I think especially when it is coming to, managing your stuff, right? So like, hey, outbound messages coming in from here, email. If you're one of the poor souls that has to use Microsoft Teams or whatever. As an ex-employee, am I allowed to say that?
You are. I live in Seattle. You were allowed to say that.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, but I do think that this is one of those challenges, right? Like that you actually have, like, hey, how can I actually minimize the amount of attention that is necessary to derive value? And that is an interesting kind of dynamic when we talk about financial services, because it's not a topic that anyone wants to deal with, but they kind of have to.
Yeah, it's true. And if you think about team management, I think that same connection thing is real, right? So you're giving them tools to try and be efficient with their time and maximize their productivity, but you don't have that like human connection of the in office, right? So it's a really interesting thing to see how you can leverage that technology to create that, because that human connection does help breed efficient teams, right? So it's always this fine balance. I'm not a dictator. Like, I'm all for facilitating and autonomy and expectations. But in financial services, then you get into this situation where it's a really boring subject that people want to avoid. And this is where I'll get on my soapbox. It is fundamental to human health. Like, poverty and a lack of financial security is a social determinant of health. People have worse outcomes. They have more chronic diseases. They have more obesity. They have all kinds of health problems. And I mean, emotional, psychological, behavioral problems when they are financially insecure. So what we're trying to do is kind of turn the conversation from, oh my God, banking is so boring, to financial health is just a part of holistic health. You eat well, you do your greens, we go do our boxing classes, we try and mentally manage our mental health, and we like finances should just be inserted into all these behaviors that we have on a daily basis. It's just another one of the kind of sleep, nutrition, like we check in our finances. Great, let's go.
I guess I'm going to say maybe something that annoys some people here. I don't know. Like, I didn't want to go down this road, but like, I really hope that specific types of companies are starting to crash and burn in hell, specifically credit card companies. Because, and this is something that I've always been trying to advocate for, like, if you want to understand whether a system or an app or a service, whatever you use in your life, whether it really is good for you, you need to understand its incentives behind it, right? So, for instance, dating apps actually make the most money if you stay on them. Right. So it's just like, no, it's good if you have an occasional match, but like not too good and so forth. Now, whether that makes sense or not to you is maybe one thing, but like if you think about credit cards, why is it that in 2024, I am not capable of having an American Express of any level, right? Like that has a good online banking that warns me when I'm overdrafting or, like when the credit card bills are coming in. Why not? They want to stay obscure because in this obscurity, they make money. That is what it is. It's the same with airlines. It's just like the systems as we have created, right? Like we built these kind of monsters out of there. And this is exactly what's happening.
And the biggest thing for me in that is also the interest. Like there is such a disproportionate, and it's become excessive in the last 20 years of I can give you my money and you can go lend it out for 7-8%, right? But you're charging me 25% interest if I'm not paying it back, right? Like the gap between the amount that I receive back and I get, if it's like a savings account in America, it's like maybe 3%, 4%, 5% now, and you're getting 25% out of me. Like it's just, to your point, I say that to my child, I say to everyone's like, figure out how people make money off of you. Like if that's a free app, how are they making money off of you, right? The whole system needs to has a lot of problems.
I mean, that's just the American system is even triply and four, like, I don't know, how do you say, like quadruple bad? Because we don't have that in Europe. It's not as bad. I think the allowed interest rates in most countries here is about 8% or something that you can charge maximum over a credit card. I'm not 100% sure. But I don't want to talk too much about credit cards, to be honest. But going back to this entire thing, so I really like that you have this kind of concept of like having an actually good mission that I also believe, right? So it is aligned with the people that you're offering the stuff to, and then it gives you some really good benefits, and then you you start to kind of get maybe an entrance maybe into the B2B world, which is a different word for upmarket behavior or like selling into a more lucrative like per person kind of market and so forth. So how has this now happened for you? So let's say you have your app, this seems to work, you have people who are engaged and they also save money, they're also grateful, so you're doing something good and so forth. Did this inbound from B2B companies already materialize? And if so, like, how does this happen? Is this through conversations? Is this through emails? Like, where does this stuff materialize and where does it go?
Great question. My go-to-market. It's been really interesting. So we pivoted into this employer market just in 2024. So we've been in this market a full year and we've learned that like historically, it was easier to get Google ads and Instagram and all that to get people to download in a B2C market. In our world, employee benefits are on an 18 to 12 month cycle. It's really 12 months for them to decide, they're now deciding what all their benefits will be in 25. So you don't really have an opportunity to sell in to a company. Some of them you do, but the big ones until now next year, August, September. So it's a really interesting dynamic. Okay, how do you get your product known? So from our perspective, now it's a lot of LinkedIn. And how do you become a thought leader in this space? Because one of the things we are uniquely positioned at the moment that's in our benefit is with COVID, there was a big push for mental health services. Like back in the day before COVID, which is not that long ago, all 4 years ago, mental health and behavioral health were not a big part of employee benefits, especially in the healthcare in America. It was kind of the bastard stepchild, if I'm really like no one really talked about it. No one wants to talk about mental health like in the workplace. COVID came in and it was like, boom, wait, we're all melting down, that like the stress of this. Now it became very sexy for all the benefits, to say, okay, we need a mental health provider. So now there are a million of them shot up. They've started to consolidate. It's really hard to measure utilization and outcomes. I mean, you can see people using it, but then the question is, has that helped their mental health? Unless you survey them, you don't really know if you've seen outcomes over time. And what's ended up happening since COVID is, okay, we got mental health now to be a part of the conversation, but inflation's happened. People have been financially stressed. Credit card, not to go back to credit cards, but credit card debt has soared in America. There's all these financial stress. People are unionizing in America because of financial stress, because they're not being paid enough. So there's a lot now where we are at this nexus of, okay, we agree now that behavioral health and financial health or mental health is a thing. And and now people are saying, okay, financial stress is here. So we're at that nexus. We're able to say, look, like when people are more financially secure and they build healthy habits around finances, they have better mental health outcomes. It's been basically a year of us. We've done white papers, with Harvard. We have another one coming out with NYU, like a lot of thought leadership, a lot of conversations about what does financial stress look like in your workplace? How does it show up? And doing a lot of listening with HR and brokers that are selling, healthcare benefits. So it's an interesting shift to go from throwing ads on Google and getting users to now building kind of your own, like this network of people that are listening to you as an expert, but also you're able to provide outcomes that make them look better to their executive teams, and their stakeholders. It's been amazing to build that over this last year and really like figure out who you need to be talking to, why, and what is the narrative that they need to hear for them to look good to their teams to buy you.
So I still try to understand, like, how is your demand now being generated in terms of like these B2B clients? Because normally we have this very hard to cross wall between the B2C segment and the B2B segment, or as I call them lovingly, the B2C peasants.
Yeah. I'm sure they love that.
You can keep it. It's not a problem. So what does it help you specifically that B2C people are using your application to become financially more literate? Let me just say it like that. That drives your B2B pipeline in some kind of way. So does that mean that someone from HR that would pull the trigger on this, or like the buyer persona, is also using your app and they heard you through this? Or is it through the studies, or is it through insights that you're generating over LinkedIn? I don't know like what your channels are, but
yeah, you nailed all three. We deprecated, like we have B2C customers, but we don't promote that anymore, right? So most of it's paywall now, but we give demos to the decision makers. So the decision makers end up being like HR and essentially like CFO, kind of CEO, right? Like the financial people and the HR people. In America, they also tend to have brokers, which most of the companies have brokers that help them make decisions about benefits. So it's kind of a bifurcated sell where you're selling into employers, but you're also making sure that their brokers like you.
I love how you called it like help to make decisions. I always love it when I hear this phrase. It's like, yeah, I'm helping you make a decision as well to buy my stuff because I'm going to get a fucking incentive out of it. But okay, go ahead. Excuse me. Go.
I mean, you can't do incentive. There are a lot of regulations in America around that, but yes, it's a weird market. And really that's because healthcare in America is so fucked up, if you're letting me swear. Like it's really, those brokers are, the core thing that they do is negotiate the healthcare costs for those people, but you still need them. So you are making sure that they understand your product, they see the outcomes, and then you're doing the thought leadership on LinkedIn. Absolutely. We do advertising. We sponsor conferences. Like there are a lot of HR conferences that specifically focus on different types of benefits. So we go to a lot of conferences. My co-founder and my head of BD are both at conferences right now. I'll be at one next week. So it's a lot of in-person, and getting speaking engagements. And then it's not really that we have B2C customers that help us. What helps us is because we've had people on our platform and we've been able to change their financial lives. That's the core selling point to the HR, because a lot of the HR have tried financial health. They've had financial health attached to their 401ks or their retirements, and none of it ever worked. No one ever used it. They never got positive feedback from their employees. Their employees didn't even know they had it. Like there's just such low utilization because it was never really good. It was always kind of a side, like an afterthought to retirement planning, that they've never seen a product that works, like truly works and gives them ROI. And we can like very concretely essentially make them look good, right? Because in our world, HR has this bad reputation for being a cost center. I think it's very American because that means we're not valuing the labor that is actually producing for us, right? But we're trying to help them look good and show like, look, you've spent X amount of dollars on this product, but 50% of your population now has $400 to cover an emergency fund. And 25% of your population is reporting less financial stress over the last 3 months than they did 3 months ago. And that means they are sleeping better, more productive, less likely to leave you, less likely to look for a different job, right? So we have these like, we're trying really like the core thing that I think is the selling point is not only is this a different product, but I'm going to work really hard to make you, HR, look good to the rest of your team.
I could imagine that, like just having a landing page that says like, we make your HR finally look good.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is maybe a message that you should have placed with Boeing last week. But
Yeah.
I think
Yes. Jesus.
33,000 of their workers just walked out. So maybe coming a little bit too late now.
Well, too late. I'm right here in Seattle. That's a long time coming. There's a lot of drama in Boeing and those guys.
That's true. Okay, but we're not going to talk about Boeing. Maybe that's another one. But like, I find this really interesting because I think what's going on in there is a very interesting mechanism in the sense of like, why are toolings very, very commonly that are being bought from companies for internal usage just so abhorrently bad, right? I think that's the fundamental question, right? Let's just put it that way, because I think this is where this is going. And I think it comes from this thing that there's a misalignment, again, usually for internal tooling between what the market wants, how the market is paying for it, and how it is being developed. And the reason for this is that usually these tools, as you said, are being sold by a salesperson through HR, and then there's no incentive to make these tools good afterwards because it's mostly about the sales pitch, because you cannot test this out usually out, or like, it's not a PLG motion really, right? Like it's not something that you can self-serve yourself. So coming from this idea of like, hey, we are the experts because we did test it and we do have the provable outcomes and so forth is a very interesting kind of pitch, which I really, really like. Had many, many conversations with product leaders and also product managers that just really did not understand why their internal tooling is just so bad. This is why, right? Like, because the market does not punish you if you suck, because you're probably anyways locked in for the next 2 years on a financial contract that Gary, the sales guy, has received 20% of a commission on, right? So
Right. You've already paid for. Yeah. And it's really hard for them to leave. I mean, that's the whole, like, once you get in, it's really hard for them to get you out. Right. Like, cause they have their systems and it's such a pain. So yeah, I feel this, like, I don't know if I planned it. I can't say that I was the genius that planned it this way, because we were always, when we pivoted, I mean, who knew? I didn't know I was going to pivot. But I will say that we always had the vision of, if we get the financial outcomes for that end user, then we'll be able to sell all the other stuff. Like, then we can plug in, like, revenue and services and features into that. So it's been beneficial.
Was this your story when you were raising money as well? That you said like, hey, we're going to first do the B2C segment and then this, or like, at what time did that happen?
Ironically, yes. We always said we're going to do B2C and see if we can get the growth and the traction. And then, a secondary market is B2B2C. I mean, there's a little naivete in that because they really are functionally different. I mean, they're internal systems, right? Like the sales system, the marketing is completely different in those different contexts, but the product still kind of is focused. So when we did a lot of our fundraising, initially we fundraised as a B2C. And it was at a time when fintech in America was still very sexy and lots of money was going to it. And no one had really cracked the code on how to get that engagement. Now things like groups like Chime, are still living, but they're, again, a neobank. Like all of them, all the ones that are still alive are still like basically an online banking service. Like they try and make things sexy. Like, I'll give you an early advance on your, paycheck to get customers, but it's still all banking. So yeah, we raise money targeting a very specific population. We were saying young millennials, mainly women, but like young millennials, urban, it was like 60,000 and above in income. And while we were able to get that it's actually very diverse. We're 65-45 men. So I saw the writing on the wall that we weren't going to be able to raise the capital that we needed to compete with the Chases and the Bank of Americas of the world. And we were getting inbounds, ironically. So you were asking about how I source deals. Like, we are starting to get inbounds from HR people looking for financial wellness, and from financial groups like credit unions or other financial institutions who are looking for a financial health product So we realized kind of quickly, especially as we were going to raise that second round, of like, let's double down on all this inbound that we're getting, because then I don't have to compete with guys who have billions of dollars for marketing.
This is what happened to us as well at Small PDF when we still were erroneously thinking that we are a B2C product. Like this kind of market defines itself, right? Like you start to have some inbound. First, it's the schools, like, hey, we have a school for like 500 children. Can we use this stuff for all the children? So it is very interesting. And then like how you also kind of pivot the company almost. So we were 26 people at the time when we were starting to get this kind of inbound. And I'm just like, okay, you know what? Let's just do a lead form somewhere, right? Like, let's see, like we need to at least unify that. I don't want to have this in my email inbox anymore. And then, like 6-7 months later, it was HubSpot and then salespeople and so forth. And the rest is history.
I mean, essentially, it's kind of same. Like we started getting inbounds and we realized, oh, like, let's see what this market looks like. We hired someone in the industry and it's been all this year that she's been building the processes and the HubSpots and the systems and which conferences. Like we were at Fintech conferences, and now all year has been all HR and health conferences, right? It slowly is nuanced and changed over time.
Yeah, and I think if there's any advice in there, in that if that starts to happen, this is a signal not only from the market that they're interested in you, but that there is actually no one that they could find themselves. And, it's just such a powerful kind of statement. It means that, like we really need someone to help us. And then you're like, yeah, but aren't there financial health products? And then they say like, oh, but they're all shit.
Yeah. No one uses them. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And going through that transition, again, product has been obviously, it's been interesting with product because I come from behavioral science and data. Like I have peer-reviewed scientific papers. I was a data, like I like other people doing the analytics, but I really like, having the data and being able to analyze it. So we always cared a lot about the data, but there are pivots that you have in a B2C world. So like, not only are we selling this product into the employer, but part of our sell is now, hey, we will tell you at an aggregate level. I'm never going to tell you individualized data. But hey, HR, I'm going to make you smarter and I'm going to give you better data to inform your decisions around the next benefits. Because I'm going to tell you 85% of your employees have credit card debt or have student loan debt, or are the top 5 vendors that they're spending money on is the Metro in New York and Uber Eats. Like, can you think about when you're making decisions again on your benefits, maybe you think about a student loan repayment product, or maybe you think about covering people, like giving people rewards around Uber Eats since they spend so much money there, or whatever, or a Metro stipend, right? So we grew based on that shift. We've grown a whole analytics, like data science department that is really robust and cool because it informs the employers, like what's really happening in their employee base so they understand how they could serve them better. And it gives us like these kind of industry level data analytics that make us smarter and more informed and kind of experts in the field, in the industry, which is cool.
Do you employ right now also product managers for yourself internally for that?
Yes, product managers, but we also have a data scientist who I love.
Do your product managers need to know how to do SQL and source their stuff themselves?
Ironically, they actually already do. I love my product managers. Both of them can do it themselves, which is amazing. But I think I got lucky on that one.
I think that was the first topic on LinkedIn for 2 years ago where I started to get actual hate mail.
Product managers saying, I don't want to know that.
No, from mostly middle-aged men who just really started to hate me for absolutely no reason other than me saying like, hey, you need to know SQL if you want to source your own data, because otherwise you do not understand anything about it. That's changed a little bit with LLMs and so forth, but good memories from my side at least.
It means you're doing something right. You're getting attention at least, right? People are
I know, but no, that's just what it is. Okay, that's really interesting. So your play right now is still over HR and so forth. And you also said that you kind of changed also the monetization model. So you cut off the B2C segment and so forth. And how was this for you as a company to kind of shift from having to sell through no salespeople now to sell to actual salespeople? Like, who is the person that knows how to sell? Let's put it that way.
Oh, my friend. I am so grateful for my team. Initially, we started with it was founder-led sales. If founder mode is a thing, founder-led sales is definitely a thing.
Founder mode is not a thing, but founder-led sales is a thing. Yeah.
So my co-founder and I, we decided to make that pivot somewhere like mid-2023. So really end of 23, she and I were just like pounding the pavement, like really doing a lot of discovery of like, okay, like we have these outcomes from the employer side, but to your point, what does HR really need, since it is a bifurcated market? Like, how do I make like that sale effective? And then we realized quite quickly in the fall of 23, like, oh, we need someone who actually knows this industry. So we hired a director of biz dev. We got her from Headspace. So Headspace had done something, I don't know if do you have Headspace over there? It's like a meditation app, but it did the same thing. It was very popular in America as a B2C product. So you know the name really easily. And they pivoted into B2B2C. And she had been part of the team that did that. So it was perfect because she understood how important it is to have the product outcomes, but also it's a whole new world when you sell into this, obviously into the B2B2C. So she came on, I think in like November, December, and this has been a full year. So, setting up systems, tapping into her networks, understanding the broker market as we were talking about. And it's been a shift. There are lessons learned in this. I think I probably kept the B2C marketing play a little too long. We could have deprecated that faster, but it was still something that was effective, right? So it was hard to let go over time until probably about a good quarter into 24. We're like, no, we have to put all of our energy in these categories as opposed to keeping the kind of B2C alive. A lot of that was content. We have an incredibly high SEO. Like we spent a lot of time doing a lot of content. So we were producing newsletters and still doing like a lot essentially for the product, or B2C customers doing a content plan. It was hard for us to let go of that, but we shifted it into an HR newsletter. And it's been like the system has been able to work. We just had to shift it and refocus it. But yeah, it definitely is an interesting lessons learned of how to shift that and what parts of the company are slower to move when you're changing.
I think it's interesting because I think in B2B, you might actually return at some point again to the more open, like, what did you call it? Like thought leadership and so forth. Because I feel like the way that we buy software in B2B right now, it's not self-serve. Self-serve is just like the method of how it goes through. And word of mouth is only really useful for the biggest brands or like also brands that have a specific size and so forth. I get it, right? Like, I mean, I'm talking about PLG a lot, right? So like word of mouth is a very important topic about this. But the way that I'm thinking about how to really win the SMB segment to get a brand that is driven by word of mouth, it's really through insights. And it is really through insights that do not peddle your product. I'm not talking about, so every marketer that is now listening to this, I'm not talking about just like making your presentations flashier because, this is the first instinct that they have, or like salespeople like, hey, why doesn't it work? Well, the pricing page is not glossy enough. It really is driven by insights and then also the stuff that comes afterwards for this particular end group. And so in your case, it would be any insight that is interesting for HR at a particular scale where you're trying to also sell to.
And that again is a bifurcated thing, right? Like we have all these really incredible insights around, again, like we ask people what their stress levels are. We ask how it shows up in their lives. So I can tell you 30% of your population that are financially stressed say they are not sleeping well, right? Or that they're not eating well, right? So, but then how does that really help HR, right? That's really interesting information. But how do you then translate that into something that HR can take and use for their own purposes, right? Well, if that's true, what are the solutions for that? One, we can reduce that financial stress so they start sleeping better. So that, now we have higher productivity, right? But then how do we become essentially supporters, like not consultants, because we're not experts, but how do we help dialogue? And that's really been developing our account management. How does our account manager really create a strong relationship with the HR to be able to analyze the data we're giving them in a way that helps the HR make better decisions, right? So that's been interesting to develop and really fun to develop, honestly, in the last year. Like, how do not only, they implement and make sure that our product is being used by the companies that are paying for it, but also does that AM develop a strong relationship with the HR to be in service to HR and use those insights? It's definitely, we've developed it this year and it's new, but it's fun. And they don't have those. Like, this is really novel, data. So even the HR is like, wait, what is this? They are also learning. There's a lot of education in it, which I'm not sure is the best thing ever, but in a couple of years, it'll be fine.
No, I think it is interesting because I think in order to sell to any company, and usually you do sell into a function, right? Like, just to be honest, right? So like you're either selling into finance, into product, or into another, like you're selling towards silos. That's usually the case, primarily at least. There's very, very few horizontal solutions that are selling to the entire company, like Slack or, like communication tooling, right? Essentially. in order to do that, you need to understand that silos motivation and HR is really difficult because I would not know exactly how HR is being evaluated other than employee happiness. But that one is a very elusive concept when you talk about, hey, I'm going to be successful if I make Erin 5% happier than last year. It's like, this does not really work this way.
Yeah, it's really, so we do a lot of like NPS scores, like employee happiness, surveys. But in America, one of the biggest problems is healthcare is so expensive that actually a lot of the HR function becomes mitigating costs, like healthcare costs. So all the other benefits are like icing on the cake, and but they're an afterthought. It's really about, and right now, I mean, if you want to, this is a rabbit hole we don't have to go down, but this year specifically with Ozempic and all these weight loss drugs coming onto the market, and health plans being pressured to provide them, but at such an exorbitant cost in the United States that they're all upside down in their budgets this year, and inflation and all the things. So the tension is real. And I really feel bad for this vertical, because they kind of can't win. Like you provide Ozempic, but now your healthcare costs are 100x what you had predicted because so many people use them and it's so expensive. But if you don't provide it, you're not in competition with other employers that you want to attract talent, right? So now it's really messy right now. So I have a lot of empathy for the HR department and the function. And we try and make their life as easy as possible, genuinely, and give them wins so that they at least can go and say, well, they have some wins over here if healthcare is so crazy over there.
This is one of those silos that does not sound fun to me. Like, no, it really doesn't. And I'm not saying it in a bad way, because I'm always glad when I have really good partners in HR that really help me out all the time, because hiring itself is really not a fun process. Finding good people is, but in order to find good people, you got to go through a lot of stuff that is just extremely, it is a very emotional thing as well, because people also want to have jobs, of course, right? The entire process is just messy at this point.
I have a lot of respect for them. HR people, they're the fun ones though. Their conferences, they have a lot of fun when they go to them. They're the crazy ones. Yeah. The fintech bros are like, they're bros and they like their Vegas conferences, but
yeah, there's the fintech bros. Yeah, and then the HR sisters. My God, there are some interesting examples there.
They know how to party.
Erin, thank you so much for talking to me about this topic for almost an hour. I really, really appreciate it. Do you want people to get in contact with you? And if so, where should they do that?
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, we're hello@Navit Money, NAVIT money.com. We do not have nav.it. Thank you, Italy. Thank you very much. Yeah, if you're interested, our website is navitmoney.com if you want a demo, and we'd love to talk about it.
Cool. That was my first interview with a B2C to B company.
Yeah, lots going on. I'll come back in a year and tell you how it all went.
I insist on it. And then, only good things can happen from here on out.
Or maybe I'll tell you what not to do. Like, never again.
Well, I wish you all the best. And this is the end of this episode. Thank you so much for coming to the Product Tea.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the Product Tea with Leah. If you don't have enough yet, you can subscribe to my podcast right now on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or you can head to my website, leahtarin.com, which is leahtarin.com, where you can find much more of my material or just want to work with me.